welcome to Let's Talk Autism with Shannon and Nancy. I'm Nancy Alspaugh-Jackson.
And I'm Shannon Penrod, and I'm thrilled to be here with Nancy this
here
morning. I sometimes feel like the earth is tilting, and that sometimes it's good to have a girlfriend that gets it, that you can just reach out, put your hand on them, and steady the tilting earth, right?
Yes,
and
yes.
It feels like the earth is tilting right now. We started at the start of the show talking about our families that are in Mexico City that have had a devastating earthquake. Our families that are in Puerto Rico right now that are in the middle of a hurricane, and it's not the first hurricane.
No, this hurricane season just keeps coming at us.
And we've got friends up north that are having fires,
right.
and folks all around the world that are dealing
a lot
with
of natural
flood,
disasters,
fire, famine,
and families with children with autism
pestilence.
are involved in all of those situations.
In every situation.
Yeah.
So our
Act
thoughts
Today actually started a special fund for hurricane
Yes.
victims, and we did bring in some money. It had been helping. We helped a family get an iPad that needed to be replaced. So Act Today is helping in that effort.
And that's part of your SOS. We should let people know that for SOS, Act Today has 4 different grant periods in a year, but when you have an SOS, something that's really, it can be life and death.
Right.
And people go, is an iPad life and death? Yes. If you have a kid that's their only way to communicate, it absolutely can be. And the only way to calm themselves, it absolutely can be. So if you have an SOS, that is not on a time constraint. You can,
contact us at act-today.org and talk to us about getting your needs met.
But of course, that all takes money. And so on the other end, if you're one of those people that's fortunate today and your world isn't tilting, please make a donation. I want to say that, brief story, and I didn't warn you that I was going to do this morning. It's been really hectic since Jem started high school. We're having to drive further. It's longer hours. It's been hard on me. It's certainly been hard on him. We know it's for a good reason, but and I know I'm preaching to the choir here because you're all having a hectic time. But this morning, I just was so overwhelmed at a certain moment, and my husband was there, and he's not normally there when we're getting out the door, so he was asking questions and trying to be helpful, but that just becomes one more voice in the cacophony, and the dog would not stop barking, right? And it was the Calgon moment. And at one point, my husband said, I don't even know what to do for you. And I said, I just want to cry. And he was like, why, honey, why? And I was like, because I don't think I'm ever going to get him in the car. And of course, that made Jem feel bad. And then I instantly felt bad about that. We got in the car. He was eating his breakfast in the car because that's how little time we had. Spilled some on his shirt. He won't appreciate me telling that. So then he kind of had his moment, and he was like, ah. And I said, I'll go back into the house and I'll get you a shirt. And that kind of calmed me down. I was talking to him. We're driving out of the park, out of the driveway, going around the corner. And I said, if the worst thing that happens to us today is that we're a little bit late and you spilled stuff on your shirt.
Exactly.
Let's talk about is that, I know I didn't react well. I know you didn't react well. But the truth of the matter is that if this is the worst, because there's so many worse things. And in that moment, a car came along and totaled the car in front of us. I'm not kidding you.
Oh my gosh.
Car pieces everywhere, airbags exploded.
So it was like a reminder of the things that can go wrong.
And I said, that didn't
that.
happen to us. And if your shirt hadn't had something on it, that could have been us. We would have been that much further ahead. That could have been us. And everybody was okay. We stopped and made sure that everybody was, but airbags were deployed and cars were smashed. And I said, let's all take a breath.
Yeah.
Let's all move slower through the day.
Yes, because we're all kind of rushing. This is that time of year. And I actually backed into somebody the other day.
I'd forgotten about that,
My car was not damaged. Their car was slightly damaged. I don't know how I didn't see them in my rearview mirror. I thought I checked.
Yeah.
But it could have been a lot worse. So I keep thinking things could be worse, and let's put it all into perspective.
And when the seasons change, let's be honest about this, there is a shift in the light, there's a shift in the smells, and you will see more dead animals on the road because they are a little distracted. We are a little distracted.
Yeah.
So, when you see the dead animal on the road, remind yourself, okay, I'm an animal too, and I don't want to be
slow down.
Like
I think the message is to slow down for everybody.
Everything. Your cars, your thinking, everything.
Now, talking about things getting worse, let's go into our first story about the
I promised them
case.
they're going to see my head come off and fly around the room.
The case in Arizona, where, is it Buckeye, Arizona?
Buckeye.
It's not too far from Phoenix, 64,000 miles west of Phoenix. And there was an incident where a young man named Connor, I think the way to pronounce it is Libel, was basically detained by police and roughed up. And there was no clear reason other than the police officer who did this thought he was using drugs when he saw Connor stimming.
And you guys, we're showing you just the still of the video. We're not going to show you the video. It's really upsetting, and I think that we have too many people who watch the show who are upset by visual images. If you want to watch, there is body cam footage that's been released of the officer's body cam footage that you can see. It's very disturbing. I'm going to warn you. Where, you see what he's seeing and you walk through it with the officer. And it's devastating because as a parent of a child who's on the autism spectrum, you see it through those eyes. That's
Right.
our world, and that's our
Exactly.
training, and we know what to see. And the boy is doing this
Right.
with a string and smelling it and bringing it near his face. And the officer, because of his training,
Right.
because he is specially trained in drugs in juveniles, thinks he's using an inhalant.
And even though Connor, the young man, said, "I'm stimming,"
Because he says to him, "What are you doing?" And he says, "I'm stimming."
Stimming, and he goes,
you
"I
and
don't know
I
what
hear
that
that
is."
word,
Right.
and we know what it is now, but there was a time when we didn't.
right.
And so the officer says, "I don't know what that is."
He probably thinks it's another form of drug use.
Of course, because that's what he's trained, and what you're trained is what you see.
Right.
So the boy starts to walk away from the officer, and the officer says, "Hey, don't walk away from me." And in the reports, and I have the whole investigative report here from the police department, the officer says he's afraid that the young boy is going to go into oncoming traffic, and that was why he grabs a hold of him. And that once he grabs a hold of him, then the boy starts shouting, I'm okay, but trying to get away. And that's when the police officer immediately takes out the handcuffs. The boy is struggling. They hit a tree and slide down the tree, and he's got his knee in his back and is holding him as the caregiver comes out.
Right.
She was gone for 30 seconds. She comes running out and says, "What's going on?"
Right.
He has autism. And the officer says, "I didn't know that." But he doesn't immediately get up. And in his report, he says, at this point, I didn't know how he was going to react, and he'd already called for backup. Backup came quickly. And then with the caregiver, they talked to him and said, "We're going to release you." And they took the reports and notified the mom. And then the mom filed a complaint
Right.
and said
Because
this was
he
egregious.
suffered bruises and
All up and down his
abrasions.
back.
Yeah.
Right. So last night, they decided that there was no wrongdoing on the part of the police. They came out with a statement earlier saying, "We stand by the officer," and they came out with the whole report. It's available online. I have it in my hot little hand. This is an exercise in insanity. Can I just say that? Because over and over and over again, and we have multiple people who investigated, who refer, I have it highlighted, 22 times in a 15-page report, that due to his training and experience, he saw somebody with drugs. And that the recommendation is that this officer take a training that helps with critical interventions that will train him about the difference between a drug issue and a mental health issue, and that these things are very hard to discern between. It's very difficult. And that someone over and over and over, they say in the report, it's very hard to discern the difference, that you really have to have experience. So we recommend that he take the training that he didn't take before because there weren't enough seats. So we recommend that he take the training now so that he can discern them, but no wrongdoing happens.
So basically, they're clearing him of wrongdoing because he didn't have the proper training.
And you know what? I don't disagree with that because they didn't give him the training. So whose fault is it then that you say clearly in your argument here that he didn't do the wrong thing because he did what was right based on his training, and that if he had, you say in the article, at least in your report, at least 4 times, that the only officers who are able to discern between these two things are officers who have had this training. So why aren't you making an effort to make sure that each and every one of your officers has that training?
Steve Silberman actually wrote a piece in the New York Times op-ed opinion about this lack of training concept, and how the police need to get this under control, because there's simply not enough training at our police departments for these situations.
And I really feel very strongly that we cannot, it's just like with the teachers, it's so easy to make the individual police officer and the individual teacher the bad guy. And don't get me wrong, there are some bad guys out there. But if you are in charge, if you're the principal and you're in charge of training the teachers, then you're in charge of training the teachers. Same thing with the police department. If you know that the only people who are going to be able to discern between a drug problem and a mental health problem are people who've had the class, then why are you letting somebody out on the street to identify drug problems without giving them the other training? That's on you. That doesn't mean that there's no wrongdoing. That means you were wrong. You were wrong and you better fix it.
It's just like last year, we can't forget that just last year in Miami, Florida, the young autistic man Arnaldo Rios, who had wandered from the group home and was playing with his toy truck, the police were called, and the behavior therapist was the one who was, he was basically shot. Not the behavior therapist, Arnaldo Rios was shot.
The ABA therapist was shot.
Oh, I thought it was Arnaldo who was shot.
I believe it was the ABA therapist who was shot in the foot. Okay. And the young man, we covered it here on the show, and the young man was traumatized.
Oh, yeah, it struck Mr. Kinsey in the leg. It says you're right. The ABA therapist was shot. And the young man was traumatized it still is.
And it was all over the news.
Right.
It was all over the news. And I cannot believe... And also I want to say this too, that I know people on the ground in Arizona in the autism community who have done countless trainings, be safe trainings, to talk with the police about these kinds of things. And why Buckeye had not taken them up on the offer. And Buckeye is still saying, well, we didn't do anything wrong. Our officer didn't do anything wrong. I feel bad for the officer because you only know what you know.
That's right.
Right?
Right.
It's not his job to know what he doesn't know.
Yeah.
I do think that it's incumbent upon the police department, and we always say it's incumbent upon the community, but the community did reach out and say, can we do a training? And Buckeye, I don't know, they were busy. I don't know what they were busy doing. And I hate to be flip about that because our police departments are important and they do have other things to do. But see, this is the kind of thing that can't happen.
Because it can result in we're lucky that it didn't result in a bigger tragedy than it did.
And I'm sure that this police officer feels just terrible because once you know this information, what he did was a complete overreaction. Right. But you only react within the world that you react with. And even then, you can make mistakes, right? We're not saying that there's a perfect thing, but the excuse that this is really hard to do, so it's really hard to teach, doesn't mean you don't. I, in reading this, thought back to about 6 months after Jem was diagnosed with autism, and I'm gaining a little bit of knowledge about autism at this point. We went to Disneyland, and we were in a store, and there was a boy who was darting between things and hiding under clothes racks. And there was a person saying, we're looking for a lost boy. I said, no, I just saw him. And I said, no, he's over here. And I said, hey, honey, are you lost? And he, scurried and he was, and then he started signing to me. And I said, oh, I think he's deaf. It never once occurred to me that he was a little boy with autism, and that's what he was. Right. I still was functioning under the world of if somebody signs, they're deaf. And and we were able to help get him to a place where he was safe. Nobody touched him. And mom came up and got him and said, oh, he has autism and he's an eloper. And that was the first time I heard the term elopement. And I was standing there with eyes the size of dinner plates going, oh my, because he was older than Jem. And I was like, this is what my life is about to be like. And I also felt this terror. I was like, how did it not occur to me that this little boy could have had autism? Right. But I was still new. Now I think it would be the first thing that would occur to me. And I think that it's imperative that we give first responders the tools.
Once again,
that
this
they
is
need
just
to
this
be
is an
first
example
responders.
that shows the need for that.
And it won't come, I'm sorry. I hate that in the police report, they say this would never have happened if the caregiver hadn't stepped away. Let me take just a minute with that.
Blaming the caregiver, right?
Well, excuse me, then are you saying, this is the police department, and we all need to be mindful of this because this is all of our kids. They state very clearly that they quote chapter and verse the law that allowed the police officer to take this young man down, because if you're doing anything close to your face, it means that you could be using drugs. So all of our kids who STEM are at risk for this if this stands. And then so they're saying we can handcuff you and detain you if this happens. And they're also saying wouldn't have happened if the caregiver hadn't walked away. So are we never allowed to let a person who is on the autism spectrum stand alone
ever
when they're peaceably standing for 15 seconds by themselves in a park? Is that what we're saying,
very
Buckeye
disturbing.
Police? I think you want to think about that.
Yeah, I think so too, because if we've got to have a caregiver with our child 24/7, 365 every second minute of the day, we're talking about a place that our children are never going to learn independence.
The family has asked for this police officer to give an apology, and I do not begrudge them that at all. I think that's what's best for this police officer and the boy so that he won't be traumatized. But I place the blame for this firmly on whoever is in charge of that police department. And whoever is in charge of training. I place this firmly at your feet, and I say loud and proud, if you do not fix this, anything that happens after this date as a result is on your dime. You are responsible.
Agreed.
Stop passing the buck.
All right, let's talk about another more pleasant story.
Palate cleanse?
Palate cleanse, yes. Wonderful story on today, actually. I don't know whether it was actually on the show or just on their website, about a mom who helped her son fulfill his dream of starting a bakery. Jacob Whitman faced the completion of his high school years. His mother, Shelley, met the milestone with the unexpected feeling of complete dread, which falling off the cliff, once again, which we've been hearing so much about, so much more about. She realized that once he got out of school, there was nothing for him, and that he was going to be basically sitting in the basement playing video games and collecting disability. So instead, they started a bakery. And they're only 4 months along, but it's growing at a rapid pace. And it's got a wonderful name, which it basically says no labels at the table.
Love it.
That's the name. So it doesn't label anybody. And it makes gluten-free, dairy-free baked products, and it's employing only those with autism.
They've got 13 employees now, and they're hoping to go to a storefront and have 25. We wish that upon them. I want to know if they do mail order, because we have taken to here, and by the way, on the show tomorrow, we're going to have a young man from the Miller Career and Transition Program talking to us about the different internships that you do, and we have been trying to use their services more often. That they have a bakery but they don't do gluten-free.
Right.
But they make fabulous birthday cakes, and I really love that, being able to order a cake and have it be an experience that people who are on the autism spectrum and have other, different abilities are baking those cakes, and they make scones and those kinds of things. But I secretly wish that they were gluten-free, right? Because I'm gluten-free. And a lot of people I know are gluten-free. So I love that this is gluten-free, dairy-free, and I want to know if they do mail order. Because we would order some from time to time.
That's right.
What a wonderful
So we're hoping
thing.
that they get a storefront, and it's given a whole new life to Jacob and to many of the others who have been hired.
I love this quote that she says, a year ago, I didn't know what I was going to do. Because a lot of us have that moment, right, where we go, I don't know what I'm going to do. And she said, I was battling him every day to get him out of his room, to get his schoolwork done. Now he's up, ready to go at 7:30 in the morning, and he can work a 12-hour day.
Yes.
In just 1 year. Isn't that a wonderful thing?
It is a wonderful thing.
It's a reminder to all of
not
us
only has
what
her
can be
son
done.
found his life purpose, but so have I.
There you go. Love it, love it, love it. We got a couple of other news stories. one that makes me a little bit nutty, coming to you from Newsweek. The headline is Girls with Autism Look Masculine, Study Shows, Lending Support to the Extreme Male Brain Theory. And they're talking specifically about size of forehead and distance between eyes and those kinds of things. It isn't, I hate it that they're calling it masculine.
Yes.
It just bugs me.
I know, because how is that equated with masculine?
Well, it's because they decided that it's equated with masculine. And we've long been looking for why do more boys on the autism spectrum have autism, and that the percentage of girls is less. And I understand that they're starting to look at things and micro look at things and see that facial features, but the fact that they had to label it the male brain and that it's
based on a wider forehead and a narrower mid face.
Just because you know why it bugs me? Because girls on the spectrum already have enough to contend with.
Yes.
For now to have people all over the news saying, and by the way, you have a more masculine face.
Yeah, right.
I'm sorry. Honestly, when my son's hair gets a little bit longer, people mistake him for a girl all the time. So to say that something is masculine or feminine, just bugs the you-know-what's out of me. I hate it when McDonald's says that this Happy Meal toy is the boy toy and this one is... Grow up, folks.
Says you're on a roll today.
I love it.
You're a fireball. They said this could provide evidence for a controversial theory that sees autism as a result of an extreme male brain.
Yeah. Which, then we get into talking about the hormones and the cascade and the brain, and we're going to talk about the amygdala. But again, why do you have to package it this way? It is so like caveman. Let's be in this century, and a better way to phrase it would have, if you want to say that, features that are classically considered to be more masculine,
male,
instead of saying whatever.
Instead of girls with autism look masculine.
This makes me want to barf.
And then there's another study that showed that children who have both autism and anxiety have an unusually small amygdala, but only on the right side of the brain. So yet another study that's looking at the brains of kids with autism.
And we want to do that. And the great thing about this is that we can look and see what the differences are in all of these things. I went off because I don't like the way we're reporting it, but the way I think the big hope is that at some point when we put together all of the different differences, then you're going to be able to look and see similarities. And I think that's what they're getting to. And when you can see differences and similarities, then you can start to pinpoint at what things start to shift and when they start to shift. We've long said, and this study further shows this, that it appears that something happens in a brain that is of somebody who's going to be diagnosed with autism later on, where it might grow in certain parts faster than it should have. And that when it does that, the phrase that I love that somebody told me one time, it's as if the brain has the time to set up long distance service, but not local service. So that's why sometimes our kids who are on the autism spectrum know things that are beyond their age, but they can't do the simple thing. Yeah. Right? So now knowing that the amygdala on one side is smaller and catching when it is smaller.
Only in those with anxiety.
Maybe that's going to help us to be able to change that, because the anxiety is the thing that is so overwhelming all the time, right? If we could kick the anxiety thing, we could get so much more done.
We sure could.
But the anxiety is one of the most disabling aspects.
Might be a good clue to help with developing therapies in the future.
Let's hope. Or, a better medical fix instead of a Band-Aid on top of the anxiety, something that actually prevents this from happening, so that we don't get to the anxiety. In any case, we got a great guest today.
Yes, we do. We have, once again, on this theme of parents and children falling off that cliff when their kids graduate from school, we have a mom who empowered herself and her son. And her daughter. That's right. This is Austin's Autistic Adventures. And she has started this program, and we're going to hear about it and how she has found a way to make a wonderful, wonderful program based on the fact that her daughter aged out of the school system.
Yeah,
So,
the power of one. A mom who looks and says, hey, there isn't something, so I'm going to create something.
so we're going to take a break, and then when we come back, we'll be back with Jamie Wheeler Matlock of Austin's Autistic Adventures.
Stick with us.
Hey guys, for the month of September, I figured I'd show you guys how to make a task completion chart to help your kids get through the hardest parts of the day. Parents have been writing into our host, Shannon and Penrod, the hardest parts of the day are waking up in the morning, after school, and getting ready for bed. Please keep in mind you can always modify the task completion chart to focus on the skills that your family needs most. The template we'll be using today to make the task completion chart you can find at facebook.com/autism-live. All right, let's get to it. The materials you'll be needing are the template, cardstock, scissors, hole puncher, glue, pipe cleaner, Velcro, and photos or images. We find it more reinforcing for kids if you use images of themselves doing the task that you're trying to get them to complete. So what I have here to start off are photos of myself doing all the tasks that we're going to add to our task completion chart today. The first step you're going to be doing is printing the template from facebook.com/autism-live. I have it here, and the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to trim at the top. We don't need that, that's just totally excess. Now that I trim my 3 templates, I'm going to label each one with a different part of the day that we're focusing on, such as waking up, after school, and getting ready for bed. Now that I've finished labeling the templates with the appropriate time of the day, I'm going to attach the photos that go with it. For bedtime, the tasks I chose were getting ready for school, putting away toys, putting on pajamas, and brushing teeth. Now repeat this for all the rest of the day. Now that I've added the photos to the template, I am taking this along with my heavy cardstock to hold all my tokens. I'm going to line them up and make 3 hole punches. I'm going to take this pipe cleaner and attach the pages together with it. We're almost done putting this together. Next, I'm going to take my Velcro. I'm going to put them underneath each picture. And then I'm going to add 4 on the very edge too. Now that I've attached the rough side of the Velcro to the template, now I'm going to take the softer side and add these to the tokens. You can use whatever you want for the tokens, whatever your child finds reinforcing. They could be stickers, images, spacemen, Pokemon, whatever they like. Before you use your task completion chart, it's really important that you do a preference assessment to see what your child finds reinforcing that day. Once you have that established, then you can tell them the rule for how this task completion chart works. So every time they get one of their tasks completed, they add a token to it. And the way the task completion chart functions is like a token economy. So after they put a token under each one of these tasks, they can trade it in for their reinforcer for the day. Now that you've made your task completion chart, hopefully your child will be able to use it on a daily basis and help them through those difficult times of the day. Well, until next time, craft on. Bye, guys.
Can you see me flying by your side?
Back, and as promised, we have an autism mom whose life changed when her daughter aged out of school. And so her name is Jamie Wheeler Matlock, and she has started Austin's Autistic Adventures. So Jamie, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled to meet everyone.
Where are you coming from today?
We are just outside of Dallas in a little suburb called Richardson.
Okay.
Fabulous.
And tell us how this idea came about and how it started.
Okay. Well, when Austin was in high school, she had many things to do all day long. Unlike a lot of people on the spectrum, she's very social. She was kind of the star of her high school. Everyone knew her. She was very involved in choir, had solos, and was just had a very busy day, very busy weekend. She was involved in Young Life and theater and all sorts of things. But in spring of her senior year, I went to a special needs conference, and a young lady who was not autistic, I think she had muscular sclerosis, but anyway, she was giving her little talk about life after high school and began crying because she was so lonely and bored. All her friends had moved away and gone to college, she wasn't able to herself get a job, so she was basically by herself all day long and just completely miserable. And up until that point, I had just kind of hoped that everything was going to work out for my child, that she would, be in college somewhere or find a job somewhere, even though I knew that probably wasn't terribly realistic. And then the reality of the situation began to hit me as I started looking around for what she could actually do after high school. And the answers were not to be had. There was really nothing for her to do.
So there were no programs. There were no after-school programs. There were no programs that would help her get employment, that kind of thing.
Well, here's the thing. Austin is like a large group of people that I'm finding. She is too high functioning for places like rehab or dayhab, sorry.
Right.
And she is too low functioning to really hold a job or attend college classes by herself.
Right.
So she is currently in a transition program with our high school, but it's only 2 hours a day. And like a lot of other people in her situation, she's left with 10, 12 hours a day of nothing to do.
Right.
My husband and I I was an English professor. I stopped to do this full time in May, but we were a little bit more fortunate than most people because we at least had flexible schedules. If I was teaching a class, my husband was home or what have you. But a lot of people don't have that possibility. And even the best dayhabs are very, very expensive. We are not wealthy. We both teach English.
Right.
So we couldn't afford them even if they had worked out for her. And we did try one. And this is not to disparage people who end up choosing a dayhab situation, but for Austin, because most of the people in the dayhab were lower functioning than she is, she began taking on their
behaviors.
So great characteristics.
Right.
She, after 3 weeks in this place, and she was in the best that is to be had, after 3 weeks, she began saying she was bored, she didn't want to go, and that was just not like her. So we decided that that wasn't for us, pulled her out and started looking for other things and discovered that there just wasn't any. There are TWC, that's just Texas Workforce Commission, and things to place special needs people. And she is on that list, but so far the things that we've seen have been very low skill. She was, even within her transition program, she's been asked to do things like clean tables at a nursing home or black out address labels for magazines to give to patients. And because she's super creative, she becomes very bored, and that increases her behaviors, and it doesn't work out. So I'm telling you all this is preamble for why I created my program. And please, as I said, I was an English professor, so I can talk nonstop for 90 minutes.
That's good. We like it. You're on a roll, and you keep keep
You're
going.
one of our tribe. But I want to get to because for me, what's pivotal here is that what a lot of people are going to find, and we're going to talk a lot more about the ITP process in the coming months, but because I'm learning about that and seeing all the things that an ITP process is supposed to do before our children get to the cliff. But what's shocking to me is that if your child is 18 and you get to the cliff, they don't have programs to work on the things that an ITP works on. But what you've brilliantly done, Jamie, is that your program has goals that almost exactly match what an ITP process does. And it's really, you're filling a gap that I don't see anybody else filling for those 18-year-olds. So I would love it if you would talk about the goals for your program.
Yes, I have many goals. It does not just come out and have fun, although that's what ends up happening. But we have 5 main goals for the program. My thinking is that kids that are our age in the high-functioning autistic, moderate to high-functioning group, what they need most is social skill improvements. So while OT is great and PT is great, what I think they need most is to improve their social skills. And I'm sure you guys are very familiar with Temple Grandin, who said, one of the best things people ever did for me was expose me to new things.
Right.
Are you still there?
Yep, we're seeing pictures of your program. Yeah.
Okay. So that's what I thought Austin would benefit most from, because everyone in our program has super remarkable creativity, and they're not being challenged. So my thinking is if I improve their social skills, then eventually they will perhaps have more fulfilling jobs. I'm not saying they'll all work 40 hours a week, but they might work 10 or 12 hours a week. It's something that they really enjoy with people who really know and enjoy them. So getting back to the goals of the program, the first thing is engagement. So not about once a month, every month, I spend about 15 hours creating an interactive calendar for parents. I go through every event within about a 35-mile radius. I go through Facebook and look at everything. Everybody posts there, whether your event is small or large or medium, and I see where can I take this group of kids that they can interact with their community so that the community really gets to know them and they get to know the community. We also have members of the community come to us. I've had my friend who's a science teacher, Chris Long, come and teach us the science of sparklers. So we did that one day. I've had my friend Tom Sale, who's an artist at Bardwell College, come and teach us how to make paper mache puppets. And the reason I'm telling you this is because I'm sure you guys know there's a very vague, nebulous sense of autism awareness out there. People say, oh, right, I've heard of autism. I'm aware of autism. But they don't really know people on the spectrum. So by us going out every single day to places large, medium, small in our community, by having the community come to us, they really get to know our kids. And I have lots of anecdotal stories I can tell you here if you have time.
Tell us some of the anecdotal stories.
Yeah.
This is a daily, I want to just interrupt for a second. This is a daily program, correct?
Daily meeting. It is, and I'll talk to you more about why that's unique in and of itself. I don't want to get too off track here, but I want to remind me to tell you the other two things that I think makes my program really special.
Yeah.
But anecdotal stories.
So having the community involved and interactive with our kids. Recently, I took them to see a melodrama at night. Melodrama where you throw popcorn at the villains and
you boo. Yes, love it.
I had called previously, so we got front row seats for the tables with the kids, and of course they had a great time throwing the popcorn and all that. And at the end, two of our kids, my daughter among them, ran up on stage and took bows with the cast and hugged all the cast members. Well, you can't get more interactive with autism than that. And my husband and I just kind of went, oh my goodness, well, there you go. What are you going to do? Too late. There they go. The next day, the cast came to my Facebook page and said how much they loved meeting our kids. It was the most fun night they'd had in recent memory. Wanted to know when we could come back. And while this hasn't happened yet, that's how I see opportunities opening for our kids. A lot of our kids are artists, for example. So maybe the next time the Sandwich Theater has an opportunity for some scene painting, they might say, hey, you said you had a kid that's good at art. Would they like to come paint some backdrops for us or something like that? So that our kids can start using what they're good at and having people who know and like them give them something to do.
Mm-hmm. You're making connections with the community, Jamie, and we don't know how far those ripples will go, but it's what they need.
Exactly, and that's where we go everywhere. I think you showed pictures a minute ago. We went to an art studio. We had a lady give us a private session on Canvas, and I was just absolutely blown away by how good some of our kids are. So again, that might be an occasion where she says, hey, could Ryan come and help us prepare canvases or something like that. I'm not saying everything's in the arts. We both do other things as well, but I come from an arts background, so the people I hang around with tend to be artists or professors. So I'm looking for any door I can open for them so that they really get to know our kids and, again, get some opportunities that they might not otherwise have had, because the TWC and other job placement, they're not looking for those kinds of things. Or if they are, they're not, I don't know how they would find them. They place them in grocery stores, they place them in nursing homes and things like that. But for our creative set, that just doesn't work out. So we're always looking for who will come, let us come to them, what can we do with them, how can we show you that people on the spectrum are not some of the stereotypical things that people think of people with autism. What we get a lot is, oh, I thought people with autism didn't speak. I thought people with autism didn't show emotion. I thought people with autism didn't smile. I thought people with autism were violent. those are kind of some of the kind of perceptions that are out there. So when we come in our group of, we usually have 10 to 12 kids on each outing, come en masse and kind of invade whatever space they have, and they are curious and interested and happy. It really changes the perception of autism, and I think those doors will open. We've only been around really since May. I started in January, but I was still teaching full time, and I really just put everything away and put all my energies into this in May, and we've already seen all of those things happen, and I'm finding those autistic adults who are just dying for things to do and have interaction and friendship, which is something else I want to talk about in a minute. If you have any questions right now, though, I can stop talking for a second.
Well, also one thing this does is provide respite for the parents too. So let's talk about that.
Absolutely. Although it's funny because as that is one of my goals, and you are always welcome to leave your kid with us for whatever outing we go to. I'm finding that most of our parents have bonded now, and they want to see each other, so they end up hanging out at the events, and they love seeing their kids have friends and have fun and be together. So they will every once in a while take a break and say, hey, I just want to go grocery shopping or go to a movie or what have you, but they're ending up staying with us because they like to see their kids having fun.
Yeah, good.
Amazing. And it's very affordable. We should let people know that that you've set a price point. People can, you don't have to sign up to do it every day of the week. You can come to one thing and not come to another thing, and that generally it's between, you said to us, $20 and $40 for an event, and that includes the cost of getting to the event and the ticket price, correct?
Right. But yeah, most events are between $20 and $40, as you said, typically 20. They're about 2 hours, and the reason that they are 2 hours is because that's about all our kids can stand. They love going out and doing the social things, but they'll tell me at like 90 minutes, okay, I'm done. Time to go. So we've decided that 2 hours is about the right amount of time. It is every single day. You do not have to come to every single event, and there's a couple of reasons for that. One, you're a child and you know what is best for them. So we have some kids that are very active and love things like roller skating, and some kids that hate things like roller skating. So if you don't want to come to a roller skating day, you don't have to. One of the things that was a barrier for me as a single mother for 9 years was cost. So I want to make it affordable for parents so that they are willing to get their kid out, because you can't come just, well, I'm trying to back up here. I encourage parents to come at least 2 or 3 times a week so that they form those friendship bonds, so that the community is really getting to know them. But I don't say you have to come 2 times a week or you have to come 3 times a week. We just encourage that for the friendship and that sort of thing. Another thing, when I was a single mom, if there were any events to be had and they were a week long, they were very expensive. $500, $600 was typical, and I think anybody would tell you that. So I want to make affordability part of the package to encourage parents to come. Obviously, the $20 is not going to sustain the program because, as you said, the events are covered. If we're going to the zoo and it's $20, that pays for your zoo ticket and maybe a little bit for a snack or something like that. But I'm not making any money off the parents themselves. Mm-hmm. That's never my intention, and never will be my intention.
And you're doing all this. You're doing all this by yourself, setting up all these.
Literally, all by myself. I'm doing literally everything by myself at this point. So I have people have been very generous. They have helped me sustain the program through private donation, but every month it's interesting.
And you're the only daily meeting social skills group in the country, you say? To your knowledge?
That's what I've, to my knowledge. Now, if there is, I haven't heard about it.
Right.
I had a friend when I first started, we looked into this and we looked for other things and couldn't find any. Now, there are places that'll meet once a month or quarterly or something like that.
Right.
But we are daily because I think it has to be daily. For our kids in particular, improving those social skills means going out all the time.
Right.
While things like OT have their place, they're not real world experiences. You can't practice OT in a room where it's just you and the therapist, Practicing speaking to the a ticket agent or ordering dinner or whatever. It takes actual being out in public. So we've already seen so many families. Everything that I thought in theory would happen has actually happened, and that's been really gratifying for me to see those friendships being formed. That's just been so wonderful. When WFAA, our local ABC affiliate, came to do a story on us, she was watching, the reporter was watching my kids around a table, and she said, "Oh my gosh, how many years have they known each other? They all get along so well." And I said, "They've known each other a few weeks." So our kids are hungry for that kind of friendship and interaction. They just haven't had anywhere to get it until now. Most of our kids in the program have now exchanged Facebook and phone numbers. They call each other. If I'm late getting pictures up from the event, I post them every day because they're the ones that want to see them. They'll text me and call me, "Jamie, where are the pictures? Jamie, where's the calendar? What are we doing tomorrow? Who's coming?" So that is really gratifying for me to see, and so I'm so happy for them.
Now, Jamie, where can people get a hold of you if they're in your area and would like to be involved?
Anyone can.
Oops, we lost her right then. We were doing so good and
Okay,
we lost
I
her.
know.
But there is a website that you
Okay.
can go to. And do we have that, Samantha? Can you put that up on the screen, the website? And hopefully we'll get her back. There's the
Austin's Autistic Adventures
Squarespace.com. And I know that they have information on that site that you can find out events that are coming up.
Right.
But I want to say too, we talk about on the show all the time, the power of one.
Right.
And it's always last year, was it last year or the year before, they did a 2-part special on television about the cliff, and they showed the parents, and my husband and I couldn't watch it. We had to watch it in shifts because it gave us such anxiety.
It gives me anxiety because
Right,
my
'cause-
son's coming up to it.
Because you watch the one mom and she was like, there's nothing and I don't know what's going to happen. And my son, he's done in 6 months and I don't
Right.
know what's going to happen. And of course, as you watch, you see what always happens is the mom goes, okay, there's nothing there. So I guess I'm going to have to create something. Now, sometimes you luck out. Sometimes you're me and you live in a community and you go, oh, a mom already did this for me, so I get to move on to the next thing that my kid doesn't have. And then you do. There's always a place for you to find something that doesn't exist. But, look first to see if somebody's doing something like this in your area or the thing that you need. And if they're not, I love that Lisa Ackerman, that's how Taka started. Lisa was like, I need a community of people
To talk about autism.
And so she put up a flyer and said, I'm having a meeting, come to my living room. And she could have rented out a baseball stadium for the people who showed up.
Right.
And Taka was created. And now it's all over the country. So, I think, check and see if somebody's doing it. If they're not, put out a flyer.
If you build it, they will come.
Because you're not the only person who needs it. Let's face that. And sometimes it's your answer too.
To hear that this is possibly the only program in the country for daily get-together is really kind of frightening.
Yeah. Yeah, but, now she's setting a model and saying, this is how I'm going to do it. She's had to leave her full-time job to do it.
Yes.
But her daughter has a program. She's got a mission, and all these other families are benefiting from it. And I think, before too long, she's going to have a book and other things that'll happen for her because this happened.
And that this will grow into other chapters, I'm sure.
And I'm sure that somebody's watching going, okay, now wait a second, maybe I can do that.
Maybe I can do this for my child, in my community.
Yeah. I mean, anything is possible. So it appears that we've lost her and she's rebooted. We're going to be out of time though. But we thank Jamie so much for being with us and for being an inspirational
And wish her
mom.
luck with Austin's Autistic Adventures, that it grows and goes around the country.
Okay, we're going to take a short break and then we're going to come back to close out the show and talk about some things coming up. Stick with us.
Are those your eyes? Is that your smile? I've been looking at you forever, yet I never saw you before. Are these your hands?
As a celebrity, whatever that means, you want to do what you can to give back. The way I've always looked at it, if I'm available, I'm going to be there. And when you get there and you see what folks are doing and the lives that they're touching, how can you not want to continue to be a part of it?
And for the first time, I am looking in your eyes.
What can we all do to make a difference? Not only with trying to find a cure, but to help the children and the families that may not have the resources for these kids.
When you're looking back at me, now I understand what.
And none of us are doing enough, but I think that we're doing as much as we possibly can. Because we all live in society. And the more we can all do to help society, the more it helps all of us. Yeah.
And for the first time, I am looking in your eyes. And for the first time, I'm seeing who you are. I can't believe how much I see when you're looking back at me. Now I understand what love is. Love is for the first time.
Welcome back. And we're really sorry that we
lost
weren't
Jamie,
able to
but
connect with Jamie.
we got a lot of
and
great
we'll have her back
discussion
on
in.
another time
Yeah.
too. We had some questions that came in though that I wanted to get a second to. Should we start with the stimming one?
Yeah, let's start with the stimming
Somebody
because that's
said-
something that my son has a big issue with.
And I think most of our kids do. And it just caused this child to be handcuffed over stimming.
Right, exactly.
Who helps with stimming behavior? OT or will ABA help to figure out what it means? I don't know if he is over or understimulated or what I do about it. Let's start by saying that everybody uses this phrase stimming, which is short for self-stimulatory behavior, which is a misnomer. That's even wrong. And you know this because you wrote it and said, I don't know whether he's overstimulated or understimulated. What it means, usually how we like to talk about it is that there are four basic reasons why people do behaviors. And the one that stimming comes under is the automatic reinforcing. There is something about the behavior that gives that individual a paycheck.
It's giving them relief. It's soothing
Sometimes
them.
it's soothing. Sometimes it relieves pressure. Sometimes it helps them to stay awake.
Yeah.
Sometimes there's colors that they see
That's
when
Wyatt tells me he sees colors when he does
splashes
his
water.
water.
Exactly. So, and that's pleasing.
Mm-hmm.
That's calming. We talked to Temple about the fact that she spun the metal thing on the end of her bed, because if you spin it, I'm always fascinated when she talks about it because she lights up like a Christmas tree.
Yeah.
And she says, no, because if you turn it slow, it shows different colors. And when
patterns
you
she
turn
saw,
it
the colors
fast,
she saw.
And the same thing with sand. If you take her to the beach, she says, forget it. I'm on the sand and I'm running sand through my fingers and doing it slowly and fast. She goes, oh, she says, I can take a whole day. That's great. It's the same as us playing our stupid games on our smartphones. Right. It's pleasing for whatever reason.
Yeah.
Okay, so who
back
works
to the
on
question.
it? Yeah, who works on it? An OT can work on self-stimulatory behavior depending on what the behavior is. And there I just used the misnomer, automatic reinforcing behavior. I think it's much more effective to work on it with an ABA provider because they'll work on it from a behavioral standpoint. But there are a lot of questions to ask yourself about the behavior. And I think the first most important is, how big of a deal is it? If this, when we see kids who do this, and there are a lot of people who will say to you, so what's wrong with doing this? Well, there really isn't anything wrong with doing this unless we're at the point where it's time to write something, to write, please, I need help. And if all you can do is this and you can't write, please, I need help, which takes a lot of practice and a lot of learning, then you have a potential problem. But for each family, for each kid, you got to weigh and go, how important is this?
Right. Is this taking away, detracting from their regular functioning?
Right. And is this a behavior that we can allow some of the time, or do we need to get rid of this because it's injurious to themselves or other people? We're probably going to run long, Samantha, and I apologize. So you got to weigh and go, how big of a deal? Because how much time and energy do we want to put into this? Because if it's preventing the child from ever having a friend,
Right.
that's an issue, right?
And from socializing, which it
And-
was with
right?
Wyatt when he was in the pool, he'd be splashing and not paying attention to other kids in the pool.
And one of the things, there's a whole series of ways to work on things, and no one way is going to work for all behaviors for all kids because the paycheck is different and it presents in a different way. So it becomes a thing where you take the toolkit and you go, well, let's try this and let's see how that works. And let's try this and let's see how. And you can't give up. And it's the hardest one to crack.
It really is.
Because it's automatically reinforcing. And the only way that you can effectively change an automatically reinforcing behavior, and this goes for all of us, for all of you who've tried to stop smoking and couldn't manage to do it, the only way to actually change the behavior is to change what happens before the behavior, to change what the consequence for the behavior is, and to give a replacement behavior that gives the exact same paycheck or a higher one. And then but that's a lot of variables that you have to figure out how to do. And the most important one is the replacement behavior. Because we're not going to take away somebody's, if what they're doing is regulating themselves, it is cruel to take away the regulator.
Without a replacement.
Without a replacement.
Yeah.
But sometimes it takes years to figure out what the replacement is. In the interim, what you can do and what Temple's mother did, because Temple still spins things.
Right.
What her mother did was put limits on it.
And that's what we've done with Wyatt. We
Right.
put limits on when he could go out by the pool and splash.
Right.
And when he can splash in the pool when other kids aren't around.
Right. But stop and consider, for those of you who still smoke, you probably have tried to put limits on how many cigarettes you have and how well do you keep up with that.
Right.
If the stress goes up and we haven't gotten a replacement behavior, you might have a hard time staying within the reasonable limits that you set for yourself. And the same thing for our kids. I always tell the story of Logan Shepherd, who did this, and what they did was give him the same paycheck and changed it to this, and he's
With
a professional
drumsticks.
drummer.
Right.
And and with Wyatt, what they did was
What he did was put a I put a
so
paintbrush in his hand.
there you go.
And he now with watercolor, not watercolor,
He's a
acrylics,
brilliant painter.
stimulates
He's
by
a
putting the
brilliant
water,
painter.
putting the brush in the water and being able to do that water and then put it on the canvas.
And he sees the colors there.
Yeah, he does.
Which is brilliant. He can't paint all the time.
No.
And so, so you're still working on it.
Still working on it.
And it's exhausting. And it is exhausting.
It is one of the hardest, like you say, this is the hardest nut to crack.
Right. It is, because it's automatically reinforcing. For those of you guys who have your child does movie talk or they repeat things, that is also a self-stimulatory, an automatically reinforcing. I keep using the wrong one. I'm further reinforcing that. Automatically reinforcing. And what we need to realize is that that's not just, it's not random. We have to stop thinking of these things as random. There is a purpose. That is their way of communicating. And it may be that they pick a different quote to communicate I'm unhappy and a different quote to communicate I'm scared, or they say something over and over again. When I'm having I've said on the show before, I have OCD, and when I'm having a hard time, I have to go back and check the stove. And I might have to go back 2 or 3 times, right? Because I'm having a hard time. And then I'll go, oh, I must be having a hard time today. And I have tools to help myself now. And we can give our kids tools so that they don't have to just be stuck in a groove and repeat themselves.
Right.
But you gotta remember, it's not random. And it's not just to drive you crazy. It's for a purpose. And we gotta find something that fills the same purpose.
Exactly.
Cognitive behavioral therapy helps when we know that it's anxiety caused, if it's to calm them. And an OT can help, but I think ABA and cognitive behavioral therapy are the 2 things that are the most effective because it's behavior.
Yes.
And it does give a paycheck. Tough. And I want to say briefly, we've gone over time, and I want to thank Samantha for letting me know that we've gone over time. She keeps the time, and she's very good. And sometimes I tell her, we got it. And then other times I go, no, I need more time. I just briefly want to address, somebody else wrote in and said, any advice about IEPs? My son is in preschool this year, and we have our first IEP meeting on Monday. And of course, I could do 7 hours on this. It's a rather long, but here's what I want to say. don't sign anything when you go to the meeting. That's the first most, except attendance, that you're there. I would encourage you today to send an email off to them and let them know that you're going to bring a tape recorder, and then do bring a tape recorder. There are times when you will decide later on that you may or may not want the tape recorder, because you might want to say something that you don't want to have recorded. But at least say that you're going to bring a tape recorder to this, to all of them, so that you have the right on the day of to do the tape recorder. And especially for this first one, bring the tape recorder, because you're going to want to go back over things afterwards and go, oh, I said that, they said this. Remember that it can feel stressful. And the first one feels like you're not on the team, because they're going to present you with a bunch of reports and papers and things, and you're going to feel like a bunch of stuff happened when you weren't in the room. If you want to today, when you send the email to them saying I'm bringing a tape recorder, you can very nicely ask them and say, if there are any reports they're going to be presented on Monday, could I have them on Friday so that I have the weekend to look over them? The truth is, if you ask for them in writing, they should present them. They don't absolutely legally have to, and they may just throw them at you on Monday. But if they do, make sure you say while the tape recorder is running, thank you. I know that I asked if I could have these on Friday and that you weren't able to. Can I just take a minute to go over them before? Because what you want is it on the tape recorder that you asked for them and that they didn't provide them. That's what you want. This lets the team know a couple of things: that you're not somebody that they can just walk all over, because unfortunately they walk all over people every single day. Here is the rude reality. There is like this much money that they have, because that's what the federal government has given them and has not funded their full IDEA program. And that's a problem. And there's no escaping that. They have this much money, and if they were going to give all the kids a free, appropriate public education, they would need this much money. So they have to figure out how to cut corners, and so they try not to give everybody what they really should have. You can't buy into that as a parent, because you're in charge of your kid. You have to advocate for your kid and let them figure it out. And they will try to guilt you into it if the tape recorder is not running. I've had people say to me, well, you know, we weren't able to get computers for the classroom this year because we had to pay for your son's aid. To which I then said, wow, you know, legally you have a responsibility to give my son a free, appropriate public education, and to not throw a number at me and say that other kids, you know, that's illegal what you just did. But I didn't have a tape recorder running when that happened. Have a tape recorder running and you won't run into that.
And you're going to need time to digest this, and then also to decide if you want to bring in an advocate or, you know, an attorney at some point.
Yes.
If that's within your...
But at the first one, I would say go and see what you're up
go and
against.
see.
But they're going to act like they're fabulous and that they're giving you the most wonderful thing, and we're going to give you this, and we're going to give you this, and we're going to give you this. And that might be the most wonderful thing, but there might be a whole bunch more that they're not giving you that you really should have and are entitled to, but they can't afford to give it to everybody. And that's just the rude reality.
Yes, it
I
is.
made a deal with myself that I was going to go into my kid's IEP meetings and fight for him like he was the only kid on the planet. And when I would walk out of the IEP meeting, I would fight for every kid for them to have. But in that meeting, I am nobody's mom but his. And, you know, because there is no one else that's going to be there for your kid.
No, you have to advocate for your own child.
You have to. There's no one on that team that's going to go, oh, I've put your child first. That is not their obligation, and they won't do it. So you have to do it. And if you want to, if there's anything specifically that you're concerned about, I like to write myself a letter the night before that I address to them and say, here's what we want. And I have that with me when I go in, so I just have to read it so that I don't really have to think in the moment. Then you take all the papers home, you read them all, and you can write me and ask me questions about things. And it needs to be individualized.
Yeah.
So any other advice that we could give, we'd have to know more about what your
specific
kid
situation.
what your kiddo needs.